My wife has told me, don't cry. Don't cry. But Marco Rubio makes me cry for joy.
I don't think Jeb Bush or anybody else, for that matter, would make up their minds based on who else is running, and I wouldn't either.
It was a match made in GOP heaven. Jeb Bush, 19 years senior to Marco Rubio, mentored the young rising star, gave him the political clout he needed to succeed. That's back when both men had smaller ambitions. Now, of course, tables have turned. The student has somewhat become the teacher. Rubio is not backing down from the challenge of the presidency in 2016, even if it means severing ties with his political ally of 2 decades plus, who's also made it clear that he's in the race, by the way. The two men are going to have to duke it out over donors, funding, votes within their own political party. This is going to be one of the more entertaining things to watch as we head towards 2016 and the presidential election. Newsmax TV's John Bachman is here with more in-depth on the story. John?
Well, it also might give us some idea as to why Jeb Bush seemed to be first interested in possibly exploring the idea of running for president and putting that out there anyway. But as we know, Marco Rubio has called Bush the man he most admired in Florida politics, even writing that if Bush had wanted to run for the Senate back in 2010, that Rubio would not have challenged him. But it seems like things may have changed a little bit, at least the feelings about the mentor and the protege here, even if that applies to this relationship anymore. Although he's not explicitly said it yet, the young Florida senator has made his intentions clear to some. He does want to be at least in the discussion about 2016 and running for the White House. And Ed, as you mentioned, both men came from the same political network. And if both do run for president, you can imagine the battles over money, staff, donors, tables at Jones Stone Crab in Miami, counterspace at Versailles. Both men seem to be getting closer to running to the White House each day, and it looks like we are starting to see cracks, as we alluded to this, in that supposed mentor-protege relationship. But there is a long history, of course, with these two. Rubio and Jeb first met in 1996 when they were both working on Bob Dole's presidential campaign. Then 2 years later, Rubio made his first run for office, and that was for the West Miami City Commission. Bush actually gave him a $50 donation and called him to congratulate him when he won. Now, small gestures for sure, but slowly the spotlight was turning to Rubio's direction. Now, when he wanted to enter the big leagues and run for the U.S. Senate in 2009, he first made a call to Jeb Bush to make sure his mentor was not gunning for that same spot. But those days are long gone, apparently, for Rubio, who said that there is room, as we heard, for both men in the 2016 race, telling the Des Moines Register that, quote, "I have a base of supporters that differ from Governor Bush's." Rubio has also tried to distance himself from Bush, not disputing that their relationship may have been a bit overblown. Politico and the Washington Post have explored the relationship between the two in depth, and Rubio recently said that he never actually worked for Jeb as a staffer or underling. He wants to make that very clear now. But as Rubio has also publicly supported Bush, saying the former governor is a very credible candidate.
I know that he'll be a strong candidate if he runs. From my perspective, the decision that I have to make is where's the best place for me to serve this country at this time in my life.
Well, and again, as the 2016 race edges closer, Bush is holding down a lead. In one of the latest polls we checked out in regards to this race, we looked at Florida specifically. In Florida right now, Jeb Bush has about 1/3 of the vote, with Rubio trailing him at 15%. Then we have former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee hanging in there at 11% of the vote, with the rest of the crowd. You see Scott Walker there at 9%, but a lot of the other names that we talked about so much also around that 9 or 10% number. Now, Florida, of course, is a huge part of the presidential race in the Electoral College. The last time the Republicans won the White House, it was Bush's brother, George W. Bush, who won the state of Florida. Ed.
I think the one thing we also have to remember, too, is in Miami, you mentioned this, too, that it's very local. But what we're talking about here is specifically South Florida. And there's a tremendous amount of power there because in South Florida, they want somebody young, they want somebody new. They see Jeb, who has been around for a long time. He's very big with the Latin American community there. So it's going to be interesting to watch because people have to pay attention. There is a lot of money in South Florida, and that's going to be the key. And
they both have good bases, too, along the I-4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando, and on the Panhandle, which are also strong beds of Florida Republicans.
The Republicans are going to have to make their choice, but boy, this is going to be fun to watch.
It's going to be fun to watch, Ed, for sure.
All right, John, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
All right, second hour of MidPoint on deck. How about some more fun, but some more questions that need to be asked? The director of the FBI has more than a few scathing words for law enforcement and for citizens. And it's time to get the kickback from a former decorated cop and someone from inside the Bureau, because now we finally have to start having that discussion about policing in America. That and so much more as we continue with the Friday Call, where we question everything. This is MidPoint.